Chateau Dankworth, a bounty hunter, is over at her usual work when an unknown man seems to interrupt the process. Chateau tries to confront the man, but despite being a competent fighter, she gets pinned down for the very first time in her life. Chateau is unable to believe what just happened when, instead of killing her, the man just asks for her name, implying that he is quite intrigued by her. The mission concludes with that man making no sense whatsoever to Chateau, and later on, over the course of the next few days, that same man keeps trying to approach her and get her attention by any means. The man had been assisting Chateau in some of her missions as well, but Chateau keeps on ignoring him until she realizes that fate has other plans. Chateau visits a client with her company, where she is assigned a mission to deal with the same man who had been coming after her ever since that parking lot mission. The man's name was Song Ryang-ha, and he turns out to be an elite assassin, notorious for killing many highly influential people in the past. Chateau was unable to understand why someone like Song is so attached to her when at the restaurant she's approached by Song yet again to have a word. The guy takes her out for a drink, and even though Chateau didn't like the attention at all, Song keeps on persisting. The stoic Chateau loses her cool and tries to attack Song, but she just gets held down yet again. In order to avoid attention from the crowd, Chateau agrees to go on a date with Song on Christmas Eve at his request. Chateau's agency's workers were wondering what to get her for Christmas, while Song is shown to be assassinating a random brothel keeper before he heads to meet up with Chateau. The date begins, but Chateau is clearly not willing to go along with Song, since she still has no idea what his true intentions are. After not being able to understand what this man wants for quite a while, Chateau is willing to call it quits, but Song convinces her to stay when he shows her the man he assassinated earlier on. That man was Chateau's current target, and over dinner, Song keeps stressing how he only wants Chateau's time, but even that doesn't convince her all that much. A while later, Chateau's boss, Ritzland, is unsure about seeing her with Song, and at the end of the date, a flashback takes us 17 years back in time, where we get to know how Chateau was found by the police in a car accident, with no memories other than her name. Back in the present, after splitting up, we get back to our pair as they're heading their own ways. While we see Chateau having mixed feelings about this date, Song, on the other hand, senses a problem upcoming as he's walking down the road. On the next morning, Ritzland is at the office where he's shown to be scared about Chateau being around Song, and Chateau herself is revealed to be on a retrieval mission for her last target. Song gives Chateau directions on where to find both the girl and her man's corpse, while he himself gets an assassination done. Song turns out to be assassinating the same man who hired Chateau for killing him, and this news reaches Chateau pretty quickly as Ritzland starts getting even more worried. After dumping the body in her car, Chateau was on her way back when we saw a young man with a spiderweb tattoo waiting for her. After a little time on the road, Chateau starts feeling like something is wrong, and before she knows it, she finds spiderweb on her tail. Chateau does manage to avoid spiderweb and run for her life, but the hurdle leads her to lose control of the car and fall down into the forest. Chateau's car was completely crushed by the accident. Song, who was trying to reach her, feels like something is off when for the very first time, Chateau lets her phone ring endlessly instead of how she usually rejects a call from Song. Chateau gains consciousness a few minutes later, and just when she gets out of the car, she finds spiderweb ready to take her down. Song had also started to look around for Chateau out of worry by this time, but when he made it to the accident on the road, spiderweb was already chasing Chateau down. Chateau gets in an altercation with spiderweb, and he knocks her out cold pretty quickly. Spiderweb ends up answering a call on Chateau's phone from Song, and luckily for Chateau, Song manages to guess her location with the help of this one phone call. By the time Song catches up to Chateau, spiderweb had already left, and later, as he takes Chateau to a hotel, Song reveals how the other girl in her car was crushed dead from the impact. Chateau had woken up with a fever, so Song somehow makes sure that she rests while he wonders about who could that guy with a spiderweb tattoo be, and why would he come after him. Chateau wakes up the next morning with her fever gone, and the first thing she does is going over the events that happened. While she was caught up in her own head, Song was generous enough to wash her clothes, but that didn't seem to sit well with her, as she got pretty pissed, to say the very least. After getting her clothes back, Chateau chooses to walk back to her office, even though Song was offering to drive her back. Song also returns Chateau's broken phone back, and before she leaves, she reveals how the assaulter was calling Song a traitor the moment before she lost consciousness. Chateau heads back, and the word traitor explains everything to Song. Apparently, Spiderweb was a man named Ho, who used to work along with Song at his previous organization. Ho was jealous of how Song was progressing way quicker at the organization than him, even though he had just joined, but he had to comply after seeing the senior clearly favor Song as well. We also get to know how supposedly Song was the one who shot his senior, and that was probably the reason for Ho seeking revenge. Back to Chateau. She is found by her boss while walking, and as he is taking her back to the office, he seems really concerned about how there were no signs of her for a good few hours, and how her car got destroyed. Chateau was reluctant to give any answers, and even back at the office, despite all of the boss's concerns, Chateau just apologized and excused herself back home. While on the way, Chateau constantly keeps an eye around for Song as she walks back to her place, but despite all that caution, she finds Song already waiting for her inside the building. Not wanting to let this idiot camp outside, Chateau lets Song in after calculating everything, and Song also makes sure that he feels at home. Song notices a photo from Chateau's childhood with her parents, and even though she is not willing to talk about it, Song keeps asking her different things. After staring at Song for quite a while, Chateau finally speaks up and asks why he is risking his safety by staying around her. Song seems to be aware of how Chateau's boss also knows about all this, and explains how if the boss goes after Song, it would only hurt their reputation before answering Chateau's question. The guy mentions that both of them are actually at equal risk here, as even though Chateau acts tough around him, she hasn't told Song to go away yet. Chateau starts to question herself, and after a mail from her mother makes her a little upset, Song decides to call it a day and heads out after telling Chateau to be more careful when letting strangers inside her place. Later on, Chateau heads over to the cemetery to pay her father's grave a visit, and while she's away from the office, we see how her boss pays Chateau's mother a visit. The old lady calls the boss Brian, and apparently he was only 25, despite looking 40. The boss had come to know more about Chateau's past. While out in the cemetery, Chateau was informed about a guest awaiting her in the church. The guest was, of course, Song, who wanted to spend some time with Chateau, but she really didn't want to do so at any cost. The pair is going back and forth with their usual argument when suddenly they notice 3 armed men approaching the church. Song pulls his gun out and shoots 2 of them while injuring the last one for interrogation. Song gets on with his interrogation and comes to know how the original target for the men was Chateau. While Song's attention was diverted, we find Chateau heading back to her father's grave, where she confronts Ho to save the nun. Ho was trying to make Chateau surrender, but since she didn't want to give up so simply, he had to knock her out cold in the end yet again. Song manages to reach Chateau Dankworth's grave, but it was too late since Ho had already left. Song confronts Ho over the phone while back at her place. Chateau's mother starts revealing the truth about how she and Abel actually adopted Chateau. Chateau was found in a car crash where the only thing she spoke of was her name, Chateau Noble. Seeing the little girl hungry, Abel took her to his house, and the old couple had a good time with the little girl. Chateau was later sent back for interrogation, where she was asked to identify a guy from the same crash. The interrogation doesn't go anywhere, and in the end, after retirement, Abel ends up adopting Chateau, giving her the Dankworth surname. One interesting thing that came out was that, just like the name Chateau Noble never existed in any records the police could find, the other guy who Chateau was told to identify was a similar case, and the most intriguing part was that the kid's name was actually Song Ryang-ha. Back to the present, the same kid, Song Ryang-ha, reaches a factory to confront Ho again, and he dominates him pretty easily. It seemed like Ho already had seen it coming, so he planted bombs in the car he put Chateau in. The bomb exploded, and while Song was worrying for Chateau, Ho gets back to his feet, willing to continue the fight. Ho picks up the fight, and even though he was bleeding like crazy, he ends up rushing straight into a rain of bullets from Song, and even successfully stabbing him in the core before bleeding out. The blow was pretty solid, and Song falls to his knees, while a memory shows how Song used to be a drug addict and was found and taken in by the same senior from the trades whom he assassinated earlier, named Seung Woo. Back to the factory. The explosion had caused the whole place to catch fire, and a little flashback reveals how Chateau had somehow managed to escape the car. Chateau didn't have any serious damage, but her injured leg was troubling her as she was trying to get out of the factory. Just when Chateau had run out of energy, she is approached by Song, who carries her outside to the car even though he was gravely injured himself. Moments after escaping the factory, Song ends up collapsing from blood loss, and after seeing the severity of his wound, Chateau puts him in her car and drives him to an alley doctor with some help from her co-worker, Jim. After Song was patched up, Jim tells Chateau that he will report the whole incident to boss now, and since he had no excuses, Chateau heads back to Song, telling him to get away if he wants to escape the boss. Song was offering Chateau some help in getting out of her imprisoned life, but Chateau just jokes around and tells Song to take care of himself first. 3 weeks pass by, and we meet Chateau again as she wakes up after dreaming about the dead person moments before the car crashes. Song contacted Chateau since her suspension was going to end the following day and explained how he is going to be out on a trip. While on the phone, Chateau refuses to reveal her next mission to Song, but after hanging up, she still keeps getting visions of the same person from the car crash again and again. After her suspension is finally over now, Chateau joins her boss and Jim to head over to a VIP cruise for the sake of guarding an influential person who apparently is boss's relative. The objective was seemingly pretty simple, but it clearly was not going to be as easy, as it turns out that both Song and the unknown assassin who was reporting back at the factory are on the same ship as well. We get to witness yet another flashback that shows how little Song Ryung-ha was adopted and taken in by an unknown man with the white hair. Back to the present, a party is going on the ship, and we come across Chateau and Jim, who had just come to know about the surprising news of their client actually being boss's wife. No one is really able to believe just how Ritzland got together with such a gorgeous businesswoman who's worth billions, and while Jim heads out to fix his jealousy with some drinks, Chateau is approached by Song, who also joined the party. Chateau gets seriously worried after finding Song here, and she takes him away from the party while suspecting that he might be here to harm her client. Song reassures Chateau that he has no such intentions, but since the woman won't trust him, Song offers her that he would not do anything as long as she stays with him. Chateau discusses the matter with her boss, and with his permission, she ends up staying in the same room as Song, while both Ritzland and Jim are on the surveillance cameras. Our pair is again going back and forth like they usually do, and Ritzland has to look over them, making him work overtime. Chateau was trying to keep her distance from Song, and wanted to sleep on the sofa, but the guy really wanted her to join him. After Song teases her a bit, she ends up trying to sleep, but when we get back to them a few hours later, Song mentions that Chateau should really come to sleep on the bed as she is totally uncomfortable over there. Seeing Chateau act like a child, Song decides to take matters into his own hands, and he picks her up to take her to bed. Just like Song was expecting, Chateau ends up falling asleep moments later, and in the morning, we meet Jim again, who was completely pissed since he was the only person alone on board. Sometime later, Chateau was having breakfast with Song when he mentions how Chateau was sticking out like a sore thumb last night due to her clothes. Despite her not wanting to, Song makes her get some fancy clothes as the ship reaches the port, and while the two are returning, Song receives a call from Boss mentioning the name Chateau Noble. The name rings a bell for Song, and he agrees to meet up with Ritzland later that night. Ritzland was waiting on the deck alone, and Song was also on his way to listen what the boss had to say, but things take a turn for the worse when Ritzland is stabbed in the throat by that assassin on the ship. After getting worried about Song meeting up with her boss, Chateau was on the move as well, trying to contact Ritzland, when instead of her boss, Song answers and reveals Ritzland's location to her. With Chateau and help on its way, Song turns his attention towards the assassin and starts chasing him down. After exchanging a few shots, the kid decides to retreat and Song pulls back as well. Chateau manages to reach Ritzland just in time, and before the medical helicopter arrives, Ritzland manages to clear out the misunderstanding, telling Chateau that the one who did this was not Song. As the helicopter arrives, Hawk and Jim leave with the boss, while back at the ship, Chateau is feeling depressed when she comes across the assassin who introduces himself as Jinon Wan. We get back to Song as he was packing his bags to leave with Chateau, but as the door opens, Chateau enters pointing a gun at Song. Seeing her tremble, Song figures that she met Jinan, and we get to know how the kid convinced Chateau to shoot Song by putting her mother's life on the line. Song understands and surrenders, but that just makes it impossible for Chateau to shoot him. Chateau starts panicking about how all of her memories are hazy and she doesn't even know who she is anymore. Song tries to calm her down, telling her that she can rely on him, but the guilt has already gotten to her head, and she decides to point the gun at her own head, figuring that this would save her mom's life. Song rushes forward to save her, and as he's trying to reason with Chateau, our recap comes to an end. Thank you for sticking till the end, and let us know in the comments if you guys want a second part of the series. Don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe to the channel for more. As always, we'll see you in the next one. Peace.